We've been working through this series on renewal or being renewed, and we look out into the world, and this is what's beautiful about today, is that we get to look out into the world and we get to see the process of God's creation being renewed. I took a Canadian English test on Friday. That's real. I actually did that. It was terrible. What I learned is I have a terrible memory. Not my English. Let's start over. What we get to look out into our world and see God's creation being renewed, see the process of the world and creation coming to fruition, and seeing and recognizing the cycles of life around us. And then we get to reflect back inwardly and go, oh, that's interesting because my faith has a cycle to it and has a life and has a process of renewal and life to it that has a living and breathing impact on me and on my family and on people around me and our church. We're going to hit the summer and nobody's going to show up for like 3 months straight. And it has a breath to it, a breathing in and a breathing out. And last week, since we talked so much about renewal and being renewed, and like every morning, I'm like, let's make this time a space of renewal for us so that we can carry that energy out into the world. So last week, we actually practiced that, and we sat in near silence for, how long did it feel? Anyone guess how many minutes that actually was? 5? 15? It was like 8. It was like 8 minutes. And the thing is, when we're out of practice of that Sabbath and rest, then real rest feels like a really long time because we don't allow ourselves to experience. So this morning, in a striking turn of events, we're going to continue our conversation on Sabbath because we only touched a very small piece of the word and of its place in the Hebrew context and the Jewish context. We only touched a piece of that, and we tend to ignore it for the most part in Christian context. Or we might say to somebody, hey, so how are you doing? And they're like, oh yeah, it's been rough. Are you keeping Sabbath? Like, dude, I've got 2 kids that bounce off the walls and baseball 5 days a week and a full-time job, and no, nobody's keeping Sabbath. Anyway, we just acknowledge that. That's what we're doing, is identifying that moment and that place of renewal that is so significant for not just our bodies, but our minds and our spirit and our faith as we talk about this. So this morning I want to talk about the commandment. How often do we get to do that? We get to talk about the commandments. We're going to do it in a healthy way, not in a shake your finger kind of way, but in a healthy way. Let's talk about the commandments of God. And what's beautiful about this moment is that it has context. And we normally, Christians, see the commandments on the wall, like this nice, cute little poster for the children's class. Or I don't know where else we see the commandments. It's unlikely that we're reading Exodus or Deuteronomy, so I don't think we've seen it there. Anyway, so we're going to talk about it in a healthy way, not in a shake your finger kind of way, but in a healthy way. And they have context. There's a story behind them. There's a God speaking behind them that has something real and authentic and fresh, and it's not just a list of things you're not supposed to do. It's interesting in the Jewish context. The commandments begin at a different place. Like if you go into a synagogue and you see that cute little signage of the 10 commandments, it will be ordered slightly different than if you go into your Southern Baptist church and you see a list of those 10 commandments. It has a different presence about it, but it also begins differently. In the Jewish tradition, the commandments begin with, number 1 is part of God's story. It's not simply that you should have no other gods before me. The full commandment is, I am the Lord your God. Well, that's a place to start. Who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. That's the first commandment. And we like to cut that off because it doesn't sound like a commandment, but the commandment is the memory, the reality of who our God is, the acknowledgement that all the other things that we hear about gods around us, think then first, we'll get back to us later, think then. All the other gods, the Egyptian gods, Pharaoh who exonerates himself as God, all of these other things that tell us what gods are, this is a different God. This is a God that begins the story in a place of liberation. Oh, there's that word. In a place, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, who brought you out of a land of oppression, who brought you out of slavery, a house of slavery. That's the first commandment. Now, how are we going to get to Sabbath? We're going to get to Sabbath because the Sabbath comes in a list of commandments that begins with, let me remind you who I am. Now let's talk about the Exodus story, because that's where these are coming from. They're coming out of this place of this story of the Exodus when God pulls these people out. Here's the story, just briefly. Here's the story. The people of God, the Hebrew people, or the people that are becoming God's people through covenant and this sort of thing, are in captivity in Egypt. And they are building, working day in and day out to create the massive structures, interestingly, the storehouses for wealth of the Egyptian kingdom. There's so much money, there's so much commodity, there's so much greatness in this land of Egypt that they have to continue to drive the Hebrew people and presumably all of the rest of their enslaved people as well, to continue to build storehouses so that they can store their grain commodity, their wealth, and gather up more wealth, and in the process create more work. And so it is an endless cycle of work. Pharaoh says, I need more. It takes more work to get more. And we're going to press harder and harder. Walter Brueggemann breaks this down in a really beautiful kind of like, let me remind you how much work and how much pressure on work is happening. And so he's condensed Exodus 5 with this language and just bringing the purpose of it out. Why are you taking the people away from their work? Get to your labors. Yet you want them to stop working. Verse 5. You shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But you shall require of them the same quantity of bricks as they have made previously. Do not diminish it, for they are lazy. Yet let heavier work be laid on them. They will labor at it and pay no attention to the deceptive words. I will not give you straw. Go and get straw yourselves wherever you can find it, but your work will not be lessened in the least. Complete your work, the same daily assignment as when you were given straw. Why did you not finish the required quantity of bricks yesterday and today as you did before? No straw is given to your servants. This is all there. This is repetitive. Get back to work. Get back to work. Work, work, work. So the God of liberation that begins in this place is a God that says you are being freed from this life of work. It doesn't mean it's not required. What it means is this is a God who completes work with rest. And so the shift from I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slaves, the shift from that into keep the Sabbath holy is a reminder. You have a choice. You can choose the gods of Egypt that require more and more and more and more. Or you can choose the God of Israel that requires rest on your soul and on your body. You can choose a God or gods that demand work to fulfill their needs. Or you can choose a God of restfulness. This is a striking contrast between these two. The next line of the Ten Commandments is, "You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. And you shall not bow down to worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the iniquity of parents to the third and fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments." What happens when you create an image? You control it. You control what it is, how it functions, how it's used, who has access to it, what its purpose is, what it feels like and consists of. If you have the means, you make that image out of gold, it becomes a commodity. The God of Israel that is rejecting and pulling you out of the place of oppression is a God who says you can't contain or control or create access through imagery. It's not about where your focal point is for worship. It's about, I am not a God of commodity. And you won't treat me that way. You won't do with that gold to make that. Now, what happens next is interesting. As soon as they get a chance, Solomon builds this beautiful temple. And the Bible goes to great lengths to describe the gold overcase, the gold sacraments, the gold pieces, the gold seating, the gold, everything is covered in gold. And it is clear that it is to bring honor on Solomon as well as God. It has become a commodity. It has become a thing that we can control and that we can create and box. Quite literally, that's what they do next, is they put God in a box. So as we're working into this language of verse 8, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, but rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. And remember from last week, that Sabbath day is the first day, the first time in the Bible that word holy shows up. Everything is good. God created, God saw that it was good. God created, God saw that it was good. But on the seventh day, when God completed his work by resting, he made it holy. It's a different designation. It's a different moment. It is a moment in rest, in time, where you meet God. That's the purpose of the Sabbath, is to set that time aside, not only to let your body rest, but also to let your spirit rest, to let the work rest, and so that you can meet God in that moment. And so the context of this Exodus story and these Exodus commandments is first, I'm the God that brought you out of this land of Egypt. Second, you can't commodify God. And third, take time to rest. Take time to be present in your own life and in the lives of your family and in creation, restfully. In one sense, it is a choice between God's of restlessness and a God of restfulness. And this for a long time is a rubbing point everywhere that God's people go. As we move into the Roman era and the Greco-Roman world, we see the persistence of this. Your role as community, as being involved in the city-state, is to be a part of the community. And when you rest on day 7, you pull yourself out of community. And they see it as a very negative, anti-community kind of thing. And for the Jewish moment of the Sabbath, the idea is just the opposite, that you rest for the sake of community, for the sake of being present in your world and in this space. So let's move forward a moment. It's not difficult to see that we currently live in a world of restlessness. And on the outset, a lot of our Bible, a lot of what we expect to come out of our faith is lots and lots of work. We're expected to carry the message, to care for the least of these, to carry our faith into the world around us. And so that in some way it feels like that we should never stop working. And this Sabbath keeping moment is one that says you have to stop. And you have to do it for your sake, but you also have to do it for the sake of God, and you also have to do it for the sake of your community, to stop desiring commodity over a God of restfulness. So it's not difficult to see that we're a society of restlessness. We have gadgets attached to our bodies, quite literally sometimes, that keep us connected with the world around us. We have, I'm terrible, and I'm maybe the worst among us here. We have, from the moment we wake up, a gadget feeding us information to the moment we fall asleep to that gadget feeding us information. It is a world that does not rest. And then you try, and somebody says, "Oh, did you see my Facebook post?" No, I was taking a break. Like, oh, okay. And then you're like slighted. You slighted them, right, in that moment. This is the world that we're a part of. On top of that, if we can add restlessness and the work to create space, like we spoke about last week, that work is a constant drive to better or to grow or to increase our amount of space and commodity in this world. And the Sabbath is an anti-commodity moment that says, let go of your things, let go of your technology, let go of the drive to have more space and things, and just be present in that space and in that time with God and with your community. We're a long way from being able to do that, because commodity is so much a part of how we live and breathe and function in our culture. And I don't want to be too hard on our culture, but we're going to move. We're going to move forward real quick. to Matthew chapter 6. No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. Okay, so I have to serve God over another master. Those are red letters. That's Jesus' words right there. I have to serve God over something else. But the next line is the kicker, because it's not just other gods. It's not the gods of Egypt. It's not those idols that we hold in our hand. The next line, of course, and many of you are with me, is you cannot serve God and wealth. It is a Sabbath moment here, because what we want to do is increase our drive and our commodity, our work, to create our space, and sacrificing our time to do it. And the God who pulled us out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, is a God of restfulness, is a liberating God that frees us from that work. Not that it's not required or needed, but frees us and obligates us to take time away to rest and to be present and to allow ourselves to be renewed. The funny thing about this word is that we don't know how to do it. We don't know how to be renewed. And here it is in the midst of our text as a commandment to keep this time holy so that you can be present with God. I don't usually connect these two, but the movement from you cannot serve God and wealth moves directly into do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink or what you will wear. It is a stark contrast between the anxiety of the world and work and what I have to do to survive, and the command to let those things go in a restful, peaceful moment. And it is the same Matthew that is writing down these words and working toward this understanding that later quotes Jesus, "Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." I typically think about a yoke being heavy, about carrying the cross of Jesus, about the work that is required, the cost of discipleship, in the words of Bonhoeffer. Those are all heavy laden words of work and journey that is difficult and a struggle. And here the statement is just the opposite, as Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." A whole new understanding of yoke in that moment. Saying you have a yoke already upon you. It is the yoke of your culture, of your society, of those expectations that you've placed on yourselves, on the world of commodity, on the gods of consumerism. And here is your opportunity to listen and follow through with rest and leaving it behind. We're not going to practice today, but I want you to go and practice. And that can be simple. Sitting out in the sun and reading a book is restful and renewing and energy giving. It can be allowing yourself to sit in space. Maybe it's after the kids are in bed. Maybe you don't have that problem. And it can be in the middle of the workday where you take time aside, or whatever occurs in your life that you need to stop and just be where you are, to rest and listen to the voice of God and hear your community speaking and carry that forward. It can be with your family too. I know that doesn't sound possible. Sorry. My family is away right now, and so I have a quiet house, and it feels very restful. The Jewish tradition of Sabbath is family inclusive. It is a full moment with those in your household to sit and be restful together, to set things aside, that you can skip soccer or baseball practice, probably unless you signed up to coach. But you can skip those things and be present with your family and let the worries about the day and the workload of tomorrow pass.